Hello everyone, this is part 17 of What If Naruto Awakened New Skills, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Over the course of the next 2 years, Minato began training Naruto to be the next Hokage. Yugito spent much of her time traveling between Konoha, Suna and Kumo, and over time developed a relationship with Taihei. Both also made it to Jonin. Wahei and Kurenai eventually got together after Asuma's final mistake and settled in together a couple of months ago. Wahei also moved up the ranks and is now a special Jonin. Naruto now lives in one of the houses in the Namikaze compound with Hinata, who advanced to elite Jonin, Taihei and Kankuro, now Chunin, awaiting the next Jonin exam, share another house, and Gaara, elite Jonin and heading for being the second Jokyu Jonin, and Utsuri, now Jonin and trying to decide which way to go for her next promotion, live in another. Sasuke and Temari live together in the Uchiha compound, both now at Jonin. On this morning, Naruto and Hinata were awoken by a loud knocking on their front door. Naruto dragged himself out of bed slung on a black t-shirt and a pair of navy blue cotton trousers and trudged downstairs to answer it and opened it to see an Anbu on the other side. "Master Naruto, the Hokage has sent me to get you. He said that it's of the utmost importance and to be there as soon as possible. Battle ready," said the Anbu. Naruto was instantly alert. He knew that it would take the Anbu at least 3 minutes to cross the village to the Hokage Tower, even if he used the teleport to jump in stages, since the Namikaze compound was on the limits of Konoha. "Give me 2 minutes to get changed and wake Hinata. It will only take us a moment to get there," he said before turning and heading back into the house. "Go and sit in the front room while you wait," he said as he walked away, motioning to the front room. The Anbu moved in and sat down on the setai. The door was in the corner on the room. On its left was the front window. Moving round to the left was the wall that the setai was backed onto. The next wall was more like 2 pillars and a beam across the top, with 2 double doors leading through to the dining area. The final wall, which the door itself was on, had 2 single-seat armchairs at either end and a poster of the Konoha leaf hanging from it. 2 minutes later, Naruto came back down with Hinata, who'd kept her hair to keep it out the way, in tow. Both were dressed in their steel-like clothing, Hinata's bearing the image of a pearl and Naruto's that of a 4-tailed fox. Both had grown by about 1.5 feet over the 2 years. Naruto's skill with his wakizashi had increased tenfold, and 6 months ago he'd had a set custom made, each with a fox as the hilt, with the head as the pommel, with small red rubies for the eyes, the hilt and pommel in black, then merging into the tsuba in the form of 9 interwoven tails with deep crimson sheaths. Hinata's awari had lengthened so that it still stood at the same height as she did, and she had almost mastered it. "Right, let's go then," said Naruto. The Anbu walked up and Naruto placed his hand on his shoulder, then grabbed Hinata's hand. In a flash of yellow they were gone. They appeared in the Hokage's office to find Gaara, Utsuri, Wahei, Kurenai, Sasuke, Temari, Taihei and Yugito waiting for him, along with Jiraiya and his father. He glanced over each of them, taking in their appearances. They'd all changed quite a bit over the past 2 years, and many had taken to adding Naruto's 4-tailed fox symbol to their clothing, showing him as part of his team. First was Gaara on the far left, his hair, now dyed a dark brown. He wore slightly longer and was now straight, and the kanji for love now on his right cheek in black, surrounded by a circle. A long crimson jacket that went down to just above his ankles, with the Konoha leaf emblazoned all over it in sand yellow. Beneath that was a pair of black loose-fitting trousers. It was fastened up so his top couldn't be seen. On top of it was a light gray vest that was only over his left shoulder, that had several pockets on the left, B for scrolls and kunai, above which was the image of Naruto's symbol, a 4-tailed fox, and a pouch on the right side above the hip to hold shuriken and other items, and finally black shinobi sandals on his feet and his forehead protector around his left arm. Standing next to him on his left was Utsuri. She wore her long red hair straight, and it now reached to her mid-back. She wore clothing very much like Gaara's, with a long crimson jacket. But her trousers were a light blue, her sandals were light gray, and the vest went over her right shoulder and was black instead of gray, again with the 4-tailed fox on the shoulder. On her right cheek was the symbol for sand. To those that knew them, the circle around Gaara's kanji was to signify the meaning of Utsuri's name. Harmony and Utsuris, sand, represented Gaara, showing that they were together. Her forehead protector was wrapped around her right arm. Wahei was next, his grayish-blue hair short and spiked like Naruto's, his top was a plain black sleeveless t-shirt, his loose-fitting trousers were black but with the image of a single red eye on the left thigh and a four-tailed fox on his right with black bandages around the ankles, his sandals were also black and his waist was lined with black pouches containing his equipment and his forehead protector was around his forehead but twisted round to the left. Kurenai stood next to him, her outfit almost identical to her old one except completely black bar the image of a brown eye and a white five-sided star on her right B and the addition of a black weapons pouch on each hip and the only member of the Konoha group besides Hinata not bearing the four-tailed fox somewhere on her uniform with her forehead protector around her forehead facing the front. Sasuke had kept the outfit he'd used for the Chunin exams including the position of his forehead protector but now under the Uchiha fan emblazoned on his back with a four-tailed fox and the kanji for dust tornado, signifying his link to the wind mistress formerly of Suna that stood next to him. Temari now wore an outfit very similar to Sasuke's own, colored navy blue with long trousers instead of shorts. On her back was the image of a fan to those of Konoha. It showed she was with the Uchiha as they had agreed that her wearing the Uchiha symbol would be too dangerous for either of them and below it was the four-tailed fox her forehead protector rested around her n. Taihei was the last of the Konoha team and his face was now clean-shaven with his hair back to the same length as Hinata's. He wore a grey t-shirt with the four-tailed fox on his sleeves and across the C was a line of pockets for kunai and scrolls above which on his left shoulder was a two-tailed yellow cat, on each hip of his grey trousers were shuriken holders, the trousers themselves were held to his ankles by red bandages and green shinobi sandals adorned his feet, his forehead protector lay around his waist. The final member of the group was Yugito whose long blonde hair now reached to her and was tied in a single ponytail. Over her head was a black bandana with her Kumo forehead protector over the top and her hair coming out the gap. Her outfit was almost identical to Taihei's but instead of the foxes she had two-tailed cats and with a cat sat on Taihei was an orange five-sided star. "You may leave," said Minato to the ANBU, who promptly bowed and disappeared. Minato now wore the Hokage robes, but still refused to wear the hat, instead opting for a bandana with Naruto's fox on it. "Why have you assembled us, Dad?" asked Naruto as the last of the smoke cleared from the ANBU's exit. "Akatsuki," was Minato's reply. Over the course of the next 3 hours Minato detailed the information that Jiraiya had given him and what he wanted him to do. "So the plan is that we leave in 2 teams, Gaara will lead one team consisting of Utsuri, Sasuke, Temari, Taihei and Yugito and I will lead the other team of Hinata, Wahei and Kurenai. We head to this location between fire, wind and water countries," Naruto said pointing to a point on the map laid out on the table in front of him with his left hand. To his left was Minato, then Jiraiya, Gaara, Utsuri, Sasuke, Temari, Taihei, Yugito, Wahei, Kurenai and finally Hinata was standing on his right, her hand firmly interwoven with his own. "Myself, Hinata, Kurenai and Wahei are the advanced team. We move in and strike first, we hit them hard before they know we're coming then Gaara will lead in the second team and they'll strike while we have them occupied. Once everyone is there each of us will have our own opponent. Sasuke will obviously take on Itachi since it's only fitting he deal with his brother for what he did. Gaara will take on Sasori as his sand will make it difficult for Sasori's puppets. Hinata will take on Konan as her skill with water jutsu will negate most of Konan's skills. We know Kisame has one of if not the largest chakra reserve in the group and is a water user so Yugito will be most suited to combating his skills. Kurenai is to target Deidara, he'll need to be kept in close combat to minimize his chances with his explosives and our information suggests he's quite weak against genjutsu. Which leaves the 4 potentially most dangerous members. First are Kakazu and his partner Hidden, both potentially immortal. The aim with Kakazu will be to take out each of his hearts as quickly as possible and then finally wear out the remaining ones since in order to keep himself going the hearts are overused giving him a combat life of no more than 5 hours. Best suited for this task is Wahei since the Fuengan will help keep him safe and make it easier to take out the individual hearts. Hidden is completely immortal but he can only control his body as long as his head is attached to it. He's skilled in close combat but is weak in ranged combat so the best opponent for him is Temari since her wind can keep her at a distance and therefore safe. Then there's Zetsu, one of the most unique members of Akatsuki. We believe his weakness may be fire and since, after Sasuke, Taihei is the best fire user we have he'll take on Zetsu, said Naruto. Utsuri was confused. Why was she going if she wasn't going to do anything? Naru, why am I going if I'm not doing anything? She asked, using the pet name she had for her cousin. There is one other person in the group, though he's not one of the main members of Akatsuki. Toby Gime, we aren't entirely sure, but we suspect that his name may be false. All we really know about him at the minute is that his left eye has the Sharingan. As he was explaining this, Kakashi walked through the door. Did you say he had a Sharingan left eye? He asked a little worriedly. Yes, why? Asked Naruto. Kakashi reached up and pulled up his forehead protector. Then I think it may be Obito. Something always told me he had survived, but I could never be sure. Think about it, Obito. A Toby, but that's too obvious. Take off the O and you get Toby. I want on this mission to find out for sure. Please, Minato-sensei, he said frantically. Minato and Naruto looked at each other for a moment before turning back to Kakashi. Alright, Kakashi, you will take on Toby, establish if he is Obito or not, and proceed according to what you find out. If he is Obito, see if you can get him to return to the village. If he won't, you may bring him back by force, but if it's not him or you can't be sure, you must kill him, understood? Said Minato. Yes, Lord Hokage, replied Kakashi, using Minato's to show his understanding that this was an order and one that must be obeyed regardless of personal feelings. So where does that leave me now? Asked Tatsuri. Back up. At first we hadn't given it any thought, but I just realized that Toby is likely not the only person waiting in the wings of Akatsuki for a ring and their chance to become a full member, and I will have my hands full dealing with Paran, explained Naruto. Very well then, now that that has been decided, prepare yourselves. You leave at midnight. Dismissed, said Minato, and with that the group left the room. Meanwhile, in Rice County, in a small dark room, with walls the color of dried mud and a single candle flickering next to the dark gray steel door, in front of which stood a man wearing a black cloak with red clouds on it. His face was covered with an orange mask that swirled in an anti-clockwise direction. There was no opening for an eye on the right side of the mask, and the one that showed through the left side displayed a 3-tome Sharingan. Amadara Uchiha, or should I say Obito Uchiha, to what do I owe the honor? Came a voice that didn't sound entirely human from the darkest part of the room. So, Orochimaru, you know, not that it is important, I have an offer you may be interested in. My cousin Sasuke, if you return to Akatsuki, I have reason to believe Konoha plans to launch an attack. With an extra member in our team, we should be able to defeat them, and once defeated you will gain Sasuke to use however you wish to. Is that acceptable to you? Asked the masked man. Orochimaru stepped out of the shadows of the room and took on a thinking pose. You certainly have an interesting offer. After all, Itachi's Mangekyo Sharingan is causing him to go blind, and the only other way is to take both you and your old teammate Itachi out, but still I have a feeling there is something you're not telling me, replied the Snake Sannin. There is a possibility that Sasuke's Sharingan is at a level even higher than Itachi's. If my knowledge of this third stage is correct, there is a possibility that it becomes attached to the mind of the user, only activating for their mind. If this is the case, then even your technique would not permit you to acquire his Sharingan at all. However, it may just be that it wouldn't work if it was at that level, or it may not be the case at all. At the end of the day, the choice is yours, said the Uchiha. Or at least one of you has the brains to be honest with me. I think it will be a risk worth taking. After all, since the Kyuubi brat is still alive, it shouldn't be a problem for him to increase the Sharingan to its fullest potential, said Orochimaru, his voice tinged with sadistic humor. Very well then, I shall assist the Akatsuki one last time, and as long as I get Sasuke, I shall return the ring when I leave this time. Thank you for your cooperation, Orochimaru, said the Uchiha before turning and walking away. Midnight in Konoha. A group of 10 shinobi slipped out of the gates and off into the night. They traveled to their destination over the course of the next 4 days. They arrived 2 hours away from the base early in the evening and set up camp to rest and prepare for the next day. So the first group will travel in a single line. Kakashi will take point, followed by Wahei. Then Kurenai, Hinata and I will bring up the rear. The second group will leave 2 minutes after the first and will travel in a triangle formation with Gaara leading. Then Sasuke behind to the left and Temari behind to the right. Behind Temari will be Taihei with Yugito behind Sasuke, and Utsuri will be in the center. They will arrive and fan out to attack their respective targets. Assuming everything goes roughly according to plan, the fight should last around 20 minutes from the arrival of the advanced team to the final member falling, said Naruto, getting nods all round in agreement. At 6 a.m. the next morning, the group was standing around checking through gear. Naruto had his twin wakizashi strapped to his lower back and a set of plain black katana strapped over his shoulders in AX pattern. He wore his black battle clothes that bore the four-tailed fox. Hinata was dressed in a similar fashion with a wari strapped over her left shoulder. She also wore the battle outfit, but hers now bore the pearl on the back and a four-tailed fox on the left B over her heart. The rest wore their normal clothing with the exception of Gaara, whose gourd had shifted to a vertical position and been moved over to one side whilst a second was added on the other side to give him a greater capacity. After each had finalized the preparations and were ready, the two teams assembled into their respective groups and formations and the first team moved off. They moved through the forest swiftly and silently, heading towards the base. They arrived in front of the base at 10 minutes past 8 and stopped. Dawn was just beginning, and as if in premonition of what was about to begin, the sky was lit not in its normal hues of oranges and light reds with purple and violet, but in a crimson red eerily reminiscent of the bee that would soon be spilled. They could see a large stone rolled to the side of the door, which could only mean one thing. Akatsuki knew they were coming and were ready for them. With a silent nod, the group launched off the side of the cliff they were standing, moving into their single line and order as they did, over the river and into the cave. They each locked onto their opponents and charged at them, the rest of Akatsuki moving aside to await their own opponents. Naruto also took note of Orochimaru hiding in the shadows at the back. He knew it would be though for her, but Utsuri would have to take him on. Naruto's battle with pain was hard. As Naruto tried to launch his first attack, he had to quickly move and dodge a second pain. He was immediately on the defensive as one pain after another launched their attacks, his only saving grace being the Fuengen's 360-degree vision, allowing him to track and avoid each pain and their attacks. He watched carefully, dodging a punch, then a kick, another punch and another, then a kick, then an opening. Quickly he span up a Rasengan and launched it at the largest pain, who just absorbed it. Naruto quickly weighed this up as he went back on the defensive. Okay, so that one seems able to absorb chakra. I remember reading in the report that one of them seemed able to absorb all kinds of ninjutsu as their defense, so that must be the one, and it's likely that I'll either only get opportunities to attack that one or it'll get in the way of an attack launched at any of the others. He's careful too. Never do they all look at me at the same time, probably to make sure I can't use Kakamno him. Clever. I know I've got at least one other trick up my sleeve. Probably more if I could just get into Cubus memories and pull a couple from there, which isn't easy in the middle of combat. Got it, he thought quickly. He gathered up chakra. Ritai Bushin Jutsu, he said as two more Naruto appeared on the outside of the circle the pains had created around him. Soon it was almost an all-out brawl as the two new Narutos were immediately attacked but failed to disperse and then began launching their own attacks. Shortly after that the first pain fell. As his body hit the floor, the second team appeared through the open mouth of the cave. Meanwhile, Kakashi had been having his own problems fighting against Tobi. Despite only having one eye just like Kakashi, Tobi was very definitely an Uchiha, as while Kakashi took the first 3 minutes trying to gather the chakra needed to transform his Sharingan into Mangekyo Sharingan, whilst fighting with Taijutsu and a kunai, Tobi merely waited till Kakashi's eye transformed before switching his own to the Mangekyo. His also took on the same shape as Kakashi's, which just added weight to Kakashi's thoughts that it was Obito. So you're definitely an Uchiha, with that Taijutsu style, and if I'm right, you are in fact Obito Uchiha, he said between strikes. Indeed, I am Kakashi. Knew I shouldn't have used the name Tobi, but it's too late to change now, so tell me, was that all you came here for, or is there another reason? Replied Obito, bouncing between strikes before locking kunai with Kakashi. I want to know how you escaped, and why you were with Akatsuki. Replied Kakashi, jumping back only to come in again. Obito took the opportunity to remove his mask, showing the left side of his face to be horribly disfigured down the left side. In truth, I'm not entirely sure how I survived. I think the gender-challenged snake had something to do with it, and I joined Akatsuki to rid the world of the Biju and the accursed Jinchuriki that represent them, replied the Uchiha as they repeated the process. Does that include Naruto, Gaara and Yugito? Asked Kakashi, backing off as the second group arrived and began their own fights. But of course, they're Jinchuriki after all, replied Obito. Think again, Obito, tell how many kinds of yokai can you sense around us? Asked Kakashi. I can sense 2. Why? Replied the Uchiha. Kakashi smirked. Look around, all 3 of the people I mentioned are here, yet you only sense 2 kinds of yokai. Now think about who is fighting who and where you can feel the yokai from, said Kakashi, the smirk still on his face. Okay then, I can sense some coming from Gaara who's fighting Sasori and some from the direction Kisame who appears to be fighting Yugito, and I can't see Naruto anywhere, replied Obito. Look over at who Pain is fighting then, said Kakashi pointing to where the remaining 5B of the Akatsuki second in command were fighting. Obito looked round to see 3 Narutos going head to head with the 5 Pains. How can he be matching him without using the Cubist chakra? Asked the Uchiha in awe. Because Kyuubi no longer exists, one of Orochimaru's goons nearly killed Hinata and so Naruto laid waste to them by merging with the Kyuubi but remaining the dominant personality. Oh, and a couple more things. Minato-sensei has ordered you to return to Konoha, without harming his son, Naruto, replied Kakashi. Minato-sensei is alive. What about Rin? Asked Obito, all thoughts of the fight now gone. Yes, he's alive and has retaken his place as the 4th Hokage. Rin's whereabouts are unknown. Between your death and that of Minato-sensei she couldn't take it. She resigned as a ninja and left the village. The 3rd arranged for her to leave after a psychological evaluation showed that she would be unwilling to become a ninja at all. Never mind for another village, but I'm sure if you were to return to Konoha Minato-sensei would let us search for her. Hell, he may even help us, said Kakashi. And what about my face? I can't return to Konoha looking like this, said Obito. Kakashi laughed. Ibiki Morino looks far worse than you, and whilst he thought it best he continued to look that bad to scare the prisoners, since he's the head of interrogation, I'm sure soon it will be able to sort you out without a problem, said Kakashi. Obito seemed to become very thoughtful. I'm going to have to think this over. Go and help Sensei's son, said Obito carefully. Again Kakashi laughed. Not a chance I'm going near that fight. Naruto makes Sensei seem like a weakling. Besides, it's better we keep up the appearance of fighting for now. We'll just have that sparring match we were going to have the day we left for the mission, he said. Obito smiled and they were once again locked in combat. Hinata was faring exceptionally well against Konan, after creating 2 clones to continually bombard her with water jutsu whilst she attacked head-on, and after so many years of being able to rely on her origami jutsu, Konan had let her taijutsu and kunai skills slip and was now suffering for it, already sporting several -C as well as one particularly nasty one across her stomach, and by the time the second group arrived was almost completely drained. Deidara was having a lot of trouble against Kurenai, her skill with genjutsu allowing her to create up to 4 mid-level illusions on top of each other without even using her hands. Then she would close in, and by the time he had broken the final illusion she would be in front of him and force him into hand-to-hand combat. By the time the second squad arrived she had already rendered one of his hands useless and was starting to trap him in stronger illusions. Wahei was struggling quite a bit against Kakuzu. He had managed to remove one of his hearts by spinning quickly and launching a kunai through it. But after his initial success Kakuzu had been careful to keep them on the move and always attack with 2 of them at once. The arrival of the second team had been enough of a distraction to allow Wahei to take out a second heart by using his signature jutsu. A powerful lightning attack which emanated from his body for about 3 feet and lasted for about a minute that would paralyze a normal human, but instead it was fired directly at the water element heart, having no effect on the others. One being the earth and the other being lightning, but he did force the lightning to near failure by quickly grabbing it and launching it at a wall, forcing Kakuzu to return it to his body. He was now in his earth defense, but with the severe reduction in speed it left him wide open to jutsu which were rapidly chipping away at his defense. Itachi! Shouted Sasuke as he burst into the cave and charged straight for his older brother. He landed in front of him with his 3-tome Sharingan spinning like a top and a hard glare leveled at the elder Uchiha. Itachi just stood with his eyes closed. So Sasuke, you think you can take me without using the Mangekyo Sharingan? You must be either be very confident or very overconfident, he said, opening his eyes and instantly trying to use Tsukuyomi on Sasuke. The world turned black but didn't change to the Uchiha compound as he had planned. Then he heard Sasuke's voice coming from every direction. This is the power of the Kajigan. From here we could try having a battle of the minds, but you could never win. I have too much to live for to lose to you. Either you can return to Konoha with me quietly and face trial and punishment for the S of our clan, or you can try to fight and I'll drag you back by the feet unconscious so you can face trial. And you won't escape. We can have a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week guard with either Mangekyo Sharingan or Fuengan, and with the little chakra you'd have it would be useless to try anything. Or if you really want we can fight fair and square in hand-to-hand combat and I'll beat you or into submission. What do you say? Itachi closed his eyes and smirked. Well, I'm obviously no match for this power, so I might as well take you on head-to-head in hand-to-hand combat. said the elder Uchiha. Instantly he was back in the cave staring Sasuke straight in the eyes, and now he saw the difference in the new eyes. The tomes once like comas now looked like circles, and where once there were 3 now there were 4 connected at the top and bottom with gold rings. So brother, Sasuke's voice was laced in sarcasm, you really think that you can match me in hand-to-hand combat? He finished as he dropped into a stance not from the Uchiha's own taijutsu style. Itachi gave no reply as he slipped into the Uchiha-style taijutsu stance, and in a flurry their limbs launched into blocks and attacks. Temari swiftly headed for hidden, knowing full well the need to keep her distance and use her range as her primary weapon. As soon as she got within range she launched her first attack, firing a powerful blast of wind laced with chakra blades at her opponent. The first blast immediately removed his left arm. He smiled, squatted down, and picking up his severed limb he placed it back on its rightful spot where it instantly healed. This is going to be fun, he said as he ran at her, intent on trying to bring the fight into close quarters. Temari had other ideas as she deftly moved backwards, launching blast after blast of wind, continually slowing him down either by the sheer force of the blasts or from the time he had to spend reattaching one of his limbs. As she led the Akatsuki member on a merry dance, she began formulating a plan to take him out as quickly as possible. He had apparently planned ahead, as well as a thick steel collar was secured around his end, making it impossible to easily sever his head from his body. I'm glad you didn't keep me waiting. I hate to wait, said the squat form of Sasori as he trundled up to Gaara, whose face remained expressionless. I also understand you don't like to keep people waiting, and I'm waiting for you to make the first move, replied Gaara monotonously. My apologies, said Sasori as he quickly launched several kunai from his sleeve. Gaara's sand immediately reacted and moved up to guard its master, catching the kunai in a defensive wall before forming a hand around the handle of each kunai and launching them right back at Sasori, who soon shed his cloak to reveal his body as being that of a puppet. Gaara quickly analyzed the situation and formulated his plan, as he began using the majority of his sand to either launch, test, attacks or block Sasori's attacks. He started pulling a quantity of sand into a single area and trying to slow move Sasori to that area without making it seem obvious that he was. By sheer chance rather than Gaara's good management, Sasori landed on the sand at the same moment. Enough had pulled there. Gaara's command was instant and devastating. Sand coffin, he said, and in an instant the entire pool of sand beneath Sasori engulfed him and crushed him. With no time for escape and his external and internal being unable to withstand the immense pressure the sand put them under, the puppets gave way and the tube containing his heart was crushed, ending his life instantly. In the same length of time, Naruto had managed to remove another of the Bee of Pain, leaving him fighting against 4 opponents. One of his clones had been K, leaving it as 4 against 2, but 2 of Pain's Bee were quickly tiring and would not last much longer. As 2 of Pain's Bee launched another attack, now unable to distinguish between the original and the clone, they attacked the clone and the original removed another body from the equation. Kisame stood facing Yugito, a smile plastered across his fish-like face as he looked her up and down before giving off a light chuckle. Normally I'd be upset if I was given a woman to fight, but you're a different story, Jinchuriki of the Nibi, he said. Glad to see you're only underestimating me because of my S and at least taking into account Hekagen's still. That's going to be your downfall, fish face, said Yugito, grinning, a grin which widened when Kisame's disappeared and he growled before charging at her, same hadder raised and ready to swing. As he brought it down he smirked, thinking he had got her full on until the oversized and blunt sword S clean through her. An illusion, he pondered aloud before hearing giggling behind him. He quickly swung round to see Yugito standing where he had been, the back of her hand covering her mouth as she giggled. Nope, an after image. To me, someone as big and slow as you might as well be moving in slow motion, she said before disappearing. A moment later Kisame felt a hand on his C. Looking down, his eyes widened as he saw Yugito now standing in front of him with her arm outstretched and her hand placed on his C over his heart. I just love shocking people, she said, giggling at her own joke as an electric current flowed down her arm, through Kisame's heart and down to the ground, stopping his heart and K him instantly. Yugito sighed as she kicked the now lifeless body of Kisame. She then picked up the same hadder and felt it pulse as it accepted her as its new master for K its old. Taihei had not fared quite so well. Zetsu was not as susceptible to fire as they had expected, and even with the vision of the Fuengan he was struggling. He had switched to infrared vision in the hope of seeing the tentacles that Zetsu kept launching at him from underground, but it seemed that his body temperature was the same as that of the surrounding ground, giving him only hints of their whereabouts as they moved through the soil when they moved through an patch of soil that was warmer or colder than they were. This dance of both opponents trying to dodge and attack the other continued for quite a while. Utsuri stood back trying to look for an opponent to fight. In truth, she'd never really enjoyed fighting and was hoping that she wouldn't have an opponent to deal with. Suddenly she felt something wrap around her arms and legs and stop her moving. She heard the snake-like laughter coming from behind her. Activating her Fuengan, she saw Orochimaru standing behind her, his outstretched and elongated arms wrapped around her. I wonder how quickly Naruto will surrender when he sees I have his cousin. After all, his body is far more worthy than that of Sasuke's. All the power and knowledge of the Kyuubi and the original version of both the Sharingan and the Byakugan, said Orochimaru. As he finished, Utsuri noticed Gaara looking her way, the pool of bee and pile of wood nearby, all that remained of Sasori of the red sand. Gaara's eyes burned with rage as he saw the way the pedophilic H-Sanin was holding his beloved Utsuri, the one to bring harmony to his previously turbulent life. The rage burned at him, but overriding that was his love for her. She was in danger and he was not going to leave her like that. In a flash, Gaara was between Orochimaru and Utsuri. Orochimaru's arms fell from Utsuri to the floor and back down to Orochimaru's sides. Chakra and sand swirled around Gaara as he stared straight at Orochimaru. Oh, another berserk Jinchuriki, thought Orochimaru as he turned to run, only to find his path blocked by a wall of sand. He then tried to sink into the ground, but as the ground reached his knees he found he could go no further. He turned back to Gaara as the sand closed behind him and above their heads. Then Gaara spoke. His voice was not its normal monotone, but instead it sounded almost encased in hatred. No bee or madness, just hatred as it reverberated off the sand walls around them. You will never hurt anyone else. Aga and Orochimaru got a short glimpse of Gaara as the sand melded around him before it sealed up and closed in around him, forcing him up out of the ground and pushing down on him from above. From the outside, the sand shrank into a smaller and smaller sphere before bee poured out of the bottom of it as it suddenly constricted completely around the snake Sanin. Before Gaara turned to Utsuri, smiled and then fell limply into her arms, mentally exhausted. Naruto was still struggling against the remaining two bee. He'd quickly dealt with the body that was failing, but at the same time the other two had removed his remaining clone. It was not an easy fight for the blonde. The 2B seemed to have almost as much chakra and energy as they did when they started. He was glad that he'd managed to take out the ninjutsu absorbing body, as that was now making his life a lot easier. Wahei was starting to gain ground. Kakuzu's defense was almost completely destroyed and he was down to his last heart. Wahei had managed to take out a second heart, which forced Kakuzu to relaunch the failing heart. Not that it lasted long, and with only one left trying to attack effectively with his defense slowing him down so much, and it didn't take long for Wahei to destroy the last mobile heart before starting to use fire jutsu to heat the earth defense to the point of being completely solid, and then quickly following it up with water jutsu to cool it off and cause it to become brittle and start to crack and break. Then he started launching chakra-enhanced punches and kicks to finish breaking the earth defense. Sasuke and Itachi appeared to be evenly matched at a glance, but with a closer look it was apparent that the younger brother was barely warmed up while the elder was starting to feel the effects of fatigue. Itachi remained stationary waiting for Sasuke to make the next move, but when he did it surprised him greatly. Sasuke swiftly lifted his hand to his mouth and inhaled before letting out a stream of black fire. Itachi quickly went through the hand seals and exhaled his own Amaterasu to match Sasuke's. The two streams of black flames battled for supremacy before Itachi had to quickly jump away as Sasuke overpowered his own and came at him. He almost managed to move completely clear, but the side of the flame scorched his right arm and burned it clean off. As I said before, Itachi, you are no match for me, and now without an arm you're at your limit. Your chakra is low, you're suffering from exhaustion and now be lost. I've only just reached half me chakra and I've hardly expended any energy, and even if by some chance you manage to win you'll never make it out. Most of my comrades are winning, some have already won, and those that are struggling will soon have aid. Even your mighty leader Pain is falling. He only has 2 of his 6V left and Naruto has plenty of energy left, more than all 6 Pains had to begin with. Just give up, said Sasuke. Itachi quickly thought over his options and glanced around the room. As Sasuke had said, many were S or losing fast. Kisame, Sasori and Orochimaru had already S. Konan, Kakuzu and Pain were losing badly. Obito seemed to be about even with Kakashi. In fact, the only one that looked like they might win was Zetsu. Zetsu was in fact beating Taihei badly. His larger frame was slower than Zetsu's, and with the difficulty he was having in seeing the tentacles coming at him, he had taken several nasty injuries, including a relatively deep sea that ran from just below his left shoulder to just above the bottom of his ribs on his right. As he quickly jumped back to avoid the tentacle coming straight at him, another rose up behind him and wrapped itself around his N. As it slowly began to choke the life from him, two more shot at him as he went for kunai to try and see himself free. They wrapped around his arms and pulling him apart they dislocated them. At the same time Taihai's arms were dislocated. Yugito turned to see him, and watching him struggle to breathe caused her to see red. In an instant Yugito was standing behind Zetsu, and with an electricity-charged punch she sent him through the Uchiha brothers' battle and straight into a wall. Both Sasuke and Itachi stopped and looked in the direction that Zetsu had flown. Then as they turned back, their Sharingan caught sight of Yugito moving at speeds neither could match. Straight for Zetsu, they looked at each other, Itachi with a questioning look in his eyes. Sasuke just shrugged in reply. When Yugito landed in front of Zetsu's stunned form, a split second later she started pounding away at it with electrified fists, each hitting leaving him temporarily paralyzed, but the next landing before it could wear off. After a minute it hardly looked like any damage had been done to Zetsu, so Yugito trebled the speed and current in her strikes, and within the next minute all that was left of Zetsu was a charred corpse with a hole in the center where she had punched through him. Taihei had recovered and moved round the Uchihas to kneeling form of Yugito. When she heard him approach she looked round and smiled warmly to him. As he knelt down beside her she spoke. "I'm glad you're okay. When I thought I was going to lose you I just lost it." Her voice was hoarse but gentle nonetheless. "You'll never lose me," he replied, her forehead. She then turned round and helped him put his shoulders back in their sockets before looking him in the eyes, sighing and then leaning on his seat and passing out. Taihei just scooped her up bridal style and carried her across to where Atsuri was sitting cradling Gaara. Temari had finally managed to start bringing her plan into effect. She blasted Hiden's right arm with a double blast of wind. The first, bladed, see his arm clean off, and the second sent the arm 5 meters behind him. Then as he turned to go and collect it she sent another 2 blasts to the same spot, which was now filled with his left arm. As he turned to glare at her she adjusted her aim, and when he again headed for his arms she see off both his legs and sent him to join the arms. The wind also held him of the ground for about a second after his leg's hand departed his company before he fell to the floor. As he tried to roll to his limbs, without much success, Temari walked up holding her now closed fan in her right hand. As he rolled onto his back he saw her standing over the top of him. "What do you want now, B? It's not like you can K me," he said glaring at her. Temari smirked an amused look on her face as she examined the helpless Hiden laying below her. "Oh, I think there may be actually," she said, raising her closed fan above her head before grabbing it with her left hand as well. As soon as he saw her raise her left arm to the fan, Hiden's eyes widened in horror. In a single swift motion Temari brought the club-like closed fan down on top of the helpless man's head, leaving a red and gray mess where his head had once been. Not satisfied with leaving it at that, Temari once again lifted her fan up, this time opening it and sending the largest blast of wind yet at what remained of the head, aimed right at the opening of the cave. The wind lifted up the pieces and took them out of the cave, where the wind outside took the and scattered them, with the help of some birds and animals, across the globe. Itachi had not yet stated his decision, although watching Zetsu fly past with Yugito in hot pursuit had certainly helped sway his decision. More so after he looked around to see that Zetsu was also S and Kakazu was down to his last heart. He could also see that one of Pain's B was fast failing and Konan wasn't going to dry quick enough to survive Hinata's O, particularly with her 2 clones using more and more water jutsu. Deidara initially appeared to be on par with Kurenai, until Itachi noticed that he was in fact trapped in several layers of genjutsu and struggling to escape them. "Very well, you win. I can't beat you, and even if I could I would be no match for your comrades in my state," said Itachi, dropping his head in defeat. "Smart move, but tell me one thing. I know that the clan suspected you of Keishisui, but they had no proof, and since you already had the Mangekyo Sharingan, why the need to K them all?" asked Sasuke. "In truth there are 2 reasons for that. The first is that I would have no chance to take your eyes, which would be needed to prevent me from going blind, but the second was more the reason than your eyes. I had a feeling I may be able to find another way to save my eyesight after I heard how Kakashi acquired his Sharingan eye, but the clan had grown arrogant, and whilst pleasant to any with the name Uchiha, once they spoke to someone outside of the clan they were as arrogant and unpleasant as the Hyuga. I suppose Hinata is very much the Hyuga version of Obito. Kind, caring and pleasant to all regardless of who they are in Naruto. I understand you think of him as a brother, which is good. With the QB within him, it gave you an increased benchmark to aim for. Someone who, whilst pretty useless at paperwork, was a highly skilled shinobi and could disappear even while wearing orange, but his greatest skill was his ability to change people. You would always be chasing after him to grow stronger and avenge the clan, but he stopped you becoming consumed by rage. I realized late that it was my mistake to have you become so filled with rage, replied Itachi, his voice switching from its usual monotone at the start to a slightly happier tone at the end. Sasuke then walked up and placed chakra-absorbing cuffs around Itachi's ankles before turning and looking round the room. Only Pain, Konan, Kakazu and Deidara were yet to fall, but that would soon change. Hinata had been wearing Konan down to the point she was at now, covered in sea, running low on chakra and energy. In fact, she was now on one knee, feeling the effects of exhaustion, chakra and exhaustion and B loss. None of her sea had even begun to heal because of the water that was continuously being poured over her by Hinata's clones to prevent her using her jutsus. Slowly Hinata walked up to the kneeling form of Konan and in a single swift motion removed Owari from her back and Konan's head from her shoulders. The next to fall was one if Pain's B, Naruto deftly pulling out one of his wakizashi and eliminating the body in the same manner as Hinata had taken care of Konan, by removing his head form his torso. The remaining Pain quickly pulled out a kunai and started to parry and block the O of strikes that followed. Kakazu was nearly beaten and he knew it. He also knew there was no point in trying to seek refuge in Konoha. The fact that almost the entire team was comprised of Konoha forces told him that even if they let him live, they would hand him over to his home village so that they could punish him and collect the extra bounty for capturing him alive. He decided to go down fighting. If they wanted the bounty on his head, they were going to have to work for it. He launched himself at Wahei, quickly pulling out a kunai he S4 heist T, only to watch as the blade passed straight through and the image dispelled. He quickly spun to look for his opponent, only to feel a blade L his remaining heart as he completed the turn. Kakazu dropped the kunai and raised his hands to the blade in his C as he sank to his knees. As his knees hit the floor, he finished pulling the blade from his C and dropped it to the floor. His body felt weak, his vision started to cloud as he felt his life slipping away from him. The little bee he hand in his body started to pull on the floor beneath him before he collapsed onto his stomach. His breathing came in short, shallow gasps and his vision finally darkened as he slipped first into unconsciousness and then finally S. Deidara and Kurenai's fight was taking longer than expected. The Genjutsu mistress was still having trouble keeping the explosives user in her illusions long enough to deal a decent amount of damage before he broke free of them and moved away again. She would quickly cover the distance to prevent him using his explosives before again trapping him in a genjutsu. Then as she went to attack, he would break it and she would only manage a surface C as he dodged the attack. Finally she made a decision. As he moved away, she went through a series of seals as he put his hand in and grabbed some clay. As the clay was nearly ready, he smirked and looked at her. His final mistake as she finished the seals and trapped him in the most powerful genjutsu in her arsenal. He froze, unable to move, seeing his own death again and again in more than 100 different methods. Then the illusion broke, an immense pain in his tea bringing him out of it. He struggled to breath, bringing his remaining good hand to his tea. He felt the gash that allowing his B to spill out onto the floor and causing him to inhale his own B instead of air. Finally he fell forward, a combination of lack of oxygen and B loss causing his mind and body to fail. He hit the floor a lifeless corpse. A moment later Kurenai slumped to the floor exhausted. The last illusion had taken most of her remaining chakra reserves, but it had also given her the time she needed to take out the blonde bomb maker. Naruto swung for Pain, his blade extended and held away from his arm. Pain brought up his kunai to block and looked his opponent directly in the eyes. His final mistake in a fight he may have had still had a chance of winning. As their eyes locked, Naruto used a Sharingan ability and paralyzed him as he quickly unsheathed his second wakizashi and brought it across Pain's N.S. straight through. Pain's eyes went wide and slowly his head rolled forwards and fell to the floor a moment later. No longer receiving signals from his brain, his body slumped down on top of his severed head. Naruto then backed away to where the rest of the group had gathered. Itachi stood next to Sasuke. His wound had been seared shut to prevent B loss and infection. Utsuri was fine, having not really done anything. Hinata and Sasuke looked the least drained. he noticed that both Yugito and Gaara were unconscious, and as he thought back to the time when he had absorbed the Kyuubi, he realized that it was only his own immense stamina that stopped him from collapsing afterwards. Kurenai was barely conscious and Wahei was only slightly better off. Temari was drained but still capable of looking after herself to a lesser or greater extent. Well, Kakashi, it seems that they have beaten Akatsuki, and I think it would be wise for me to return to Konoha and we can look for Rin together, said Obito as he dropped out of his stance and put his kunai away. He then fully deactivated his Sharingan and walked over to Kakashi. As I knew they would, and I think you'll notice that the other two absorbed their prisoners during all this as well, replied Kakashi, repeating Obito's actions. Indeed I did, Kakashi. Now then, shall we join them, said Obito. It was a statement rather than a question. Both then walked over to the group and slumped down in front of them. Take it you're both exhausted then, said Naruto, receiving a nod from each in reply. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.